Hi guys, welcome back to the Little Craft House. If we haven't met before, my name is Nicole and I love making earrings out of polymer clay. Today I thought I'd bring you with me as I create this beautiful collection. I'm so happy with how they turned out. I'm really glad that I filmed the whole process. So I'm going to take you guys along with me from the very beginning of painting these pieces along with resining and assembling them. So overall it took a few days to get done. Yes, I filmed all the process so you guys can see what goes into it, and yeah, hopefully you enjoy watching me create these. I would love for you to take inspiration from these and make a pair for yourself. Even if you're a beginner, the techniques are super simple and very easy to replicate yourself. So let's get started and have fun creating these ones. Right, so we're just going to start with some white clay. I'm going to use souffle today. So I am just going to cut off a big chunk. My knife is dirty. She isn't good for white. Right. And we're just going to condition this down so that, so that's nice and conditioned, and then I'll pop it through the pasta machine to get it all flat and even. So to condition the clay, I'm working on my ceramic floor tile and I'm using my acrylic roller. And I'm just rolling it backwards and forwards, getting it nice and flat, folding in half, re-rolling. This just makes the clay get softer and more workable. Now, occasionally there's little dirty spots, especially being white, so I'm just picking those out with my little scalpel knife there. Unfortunately, one of the hazards of white is that they get very dirty very quickly. Right, so just popped it through the pasta machine. I didn't do the thicker setting. I did about one dial down just to make it a little bit thinner. I'm thinking once I've finished these earrings, I will resin them. So when I apply resin, I do like to make it slightly thinner. If I change my mind and don't want to do the resin, however, it's still thick enough that they will be stable enough without being too thin. Right, so now we can get our paint ready to start painting them. I'm actually going to pop this piece just onto a piece of baking paper. I'm going to move it to the side so it's not in my way while we prepare the paint. But when we do the painting, actually what comes in handy, because we can maneuver it around without having to touch it too much and it's not sticking onto my tile. So just leaving it on the baking paper. I'm just going to pop it to the side so it's out of our way while we get this paint ready. Now, I'm thinking paint colours. I've chosen out three colours here. I'm still considering whether I'm going to add some more colours. I was thinking sort of like, you know, a little bit of a colour clash with red, pink and purple, and then I was thinking about adding maybe a touch of gold afterwards as well. And I did just pull some white out just in case I want to make the pink slightly lighter, because I'm not sure. It actually looks like it's a really nice colour, but I might want to just lighten it up a little bit, so I'm not quite sure yet. All these paints are just acrylic paint. That's what I find works the best on my polymer clay. So, oops, sorry for knocking the camera. Yeah, just acrylic paints. These are obviously all Montmartre brand, and they're not super expensive ones. They're just your student grade paints. Okay, so I decided to add an orange in as well, so that we've got a bit of a, I don't know, is it a colour clash with the colours being so similar? Maybe, I don't know. We're going to go those ones anyway, and I've just pulled out my gold. I'm not going to paint this on to start with. I'm just going to add little bits afterwards, I think. So, yeah, I'll pop him to the side for now. With these ones, I'm just using an old business card as my paint palette. I use my old business cards for everything just so that they don't get wasted. They've got old branding on them. And I'm just going to pop a little bit of each colour on. So then we can start our painting. This pink is actually a metallic. I thought it might be nice to have added a bit of metallic in it as well as just your straight colours. All right, and just looking at these colours here, I don't think I will lighten that pink. I think I will leave them just as they are. So I'll bring my clay back over, and I've got my little paintbrush here, and it really is just as simple as painting the clay, just painting the paint straight onto the clay. So nothing special needed. I don't need to put anything down on the clay first. Just gonna start. So I think what I'm gonna do is just do some random lines. So the next 4 or so minutes is just me painting this slab. Feel free to skip ahead if you want. I have sped it up quite fast just so that it shows me making it, but without boring you guys too much. It is quite a long, slow process, especially when you're thinking about what colours go where. But obviously you could just whack out any colours. I'm thinking that this might be a really nice idea to do with some blues as well. So maybe another time I'll do some blues with some silver and make it a bit more of an ocean theme. That would be really nice too. So anyway, feel free to skip ahead. Otherwise, enjoy watching me paint super, super fast. If only it was fast in real life. Okay, I've decided I'm going to add 2 more colours. So still within that sort of colour range, but just different shading. So that's the deep yellow there, or sorry, yellow deep. And then we've got the mauve. So we're going to add these colours on as well, just to fill those gaps up a little bit. Okay, this was a new tube. I've just opened it. It didn't want to open very easy, but I think it might actually be too dark. Yeah, that's really dark. I might just try a little bit and see. We'll do the yellow one first, I think. Okay, so that's the slab all painted up. There's still a few little white gaps in it, which I don't mind. That kind of just adds that contrast, but I do need to add the gold in. I think gold will just give it that nice little, just a nice little sparkle to it. But I've changed my mind. So originally I was going to use the metallic gold paint, but well, then I changed my mind and decided to use the Posca pen. If you saw my tutorial from last week, I used Posca paint markers on some polymer clay jewellery. So if you're interested in using those, skip back to last week's tutorial. So I was thinking about doing these and just doing like some little dots and things, but I've changed my mind again, and I've decided that I am just going to use some of the foil. So this is like imitation gold leaf foil, and I think I'm going to add this, and I'm just going to scrape off some little tiny bits and place it in. That means that I can sort of cover some of the white bits, or those two little bits just there where my paint smudged. I might try and hide that as well if I can. So with this, I'm going to be really careful, because the moment that it touches the clay, it's going to stick to it. So I don't want to have any accidental falling bits. And I'm just going to use, oh, come on. I'm just going to use my knife, and I'm just going to scrape off some little tiny bits and place them over onto it. So just little tiny, you might not be able to see it with the filming. I'll hold it up once I've finished, so then that way you can see. Actually, this little tool here, it's got the silicone tip on it. That's generally pretty good for moving it over. It just grabs it nicely on the end, and then I can position it to where I need it to be. So one of the questions I get asked quite a lot about painting on clay is how long does it take to dry? So this paint that I'm using today is pretty quick to dry. It doesn't take very long at all. So what I've done here is pretty much already dry, but the gold leaf does like to stick to the clay and to the paint anyway. So I don't need to add any adhesives or anything extra like that. It's just going to stick by itself. And as I mentioned earlier, I will be sealing this once it's done by sealing it with, I'm planning on sealing with resin, but if I don't seal with resin, then I would just use something like a Sculpey gloss glaze. That will also help to protect both the paint and that foil from coming off. Okay, so comes to cutting out time now. I have grabbed a whole range of different shape cutters. I don't really have a plan other than to do this little design here. Not normally something I would do, but I'm thinking just a little one with a drop underneath. Not sure how it would go, but we might do a pair of that. Hollow flowers, because they're always fun. Maybe a couple of arches. Possible hollow circle, half circle, this shape, and then I've got my stud cutter to cut out any remaining gaps that I'm just going to make then into studs. So I'm going to try and get as much out of it as I can. Yeah, so I suppose we'll start with the hollow flower first, just because I always do flowers. It's my go-to. Now, I also might have a little bit of issues with the clay sticking in the cutters today. Generally, when I work with clay, as you probably know, I like to roll the clay onto the tile so that it sticks and then it doesn't get stuck in my cutters. But because I had it on the paper, it's not now stuck to the tile, so everything's going to get stuck in the cutters. And I know that you can use things like corn flour, but I don't like to do that, so we're not doing that. Right, there's my first little flower. Oh, I need to have my baking tray handy so I can put them on as I cut them out. And as always, all these little internals, they all get baked up as well, because they will become studs. And so once again, I have sped up the process here. I want to be able to show you guys the full thing of what I'm doing, but I don't want to bore you or take hours to show you. So I have sped it up. Sometimes, as you would know if you've seen some of my previous videos, this cutting out process can take me quite some time. I like to make sure that I'm getting the absolute most out of the piece as possible. So I am making sure that I am using up every little bit even if it is with shapes that I'm not quite sure how I'm going to use them. What I tend to do is cut out a whole bunch of things and I will just put them to the side and not actually use them all in the one go if I'm not sure how to use it. So sometimes I'll find things from a year ago and it'll be the perfect thing to use for something that I'm doing at that time. So yes, nothing goes to waste. I like to use every scrap that I can. Actually, I think I can probably get 2 more tiny studs, or their little one. Where else will it fit? Let's go up here. 2. There we go. That's pretty much using as much as I can of this slab. Oh, maybe 2 more. Can I do it? 1, 2. These would actually make even cute little like hanging down drops. I might use them for that even if I don't use them as studs. But anyway, look at that. Pretty much the whole thing has been used, but it still won't get wasted. I probably won't. Sometimes I can use my wipes to clean off the excess paint. I probably won't with this one because you can see how it's kind of pushed down into all those other bits as well. And I think cleaning it is just going to keep just snapping the bits off, and it's just, I don't think that's going to work well. So I'll find another use for this scrappy bits afterwards. I'll just chuck it to the side for now and have a look at all my beautiful pieces that I have cut out. So I'm going to pop these into the oven now, get them all baked up, and then we'll do our next steps. Okay, so I've decided with these scraps we are just going to smush them all together and make them into some coordinating pieces for those painted pieces that we've just made. So I don't like to put this straight away through the pasta machine just in case we get a little bit of paint transfer. So I'm just going to mush it all up in my hands first, making sure to squeeze out any little air bubbles, and then I'm just going to roll it out with my acrylic roller until it is nice and flat, and then I might just whack it through the pasta machine just to make it on a level even piece. So yeah, you can see it's a little bit marbled there. That's okay. I'm going to just keep going a little bit more. Through the pasta machine to make sure that they are a level thickness, the same as those other pieces that we did. Okay, I'm going to use some pigment powder. This one is Knox Gold. It's Pearlex. Look at my fingers, they're filthy from that paint. But what we're going to do, so this is all rolled out, we're just going to pop some of this on. I'll just use the back of my paintbrush, scoop some out. Now, a little bit does go a long way. We can always add more afterwards. But we're going to do it on the baking paper anyway, just in case we have any spillage. Then I can scoop it back in. Now, I do like to apply this with my finger. I find that by brushing it on with your finger, you kind of smooth it into the clay, and it just has a better hold. Look how beautiful that is. So I will bake this up as normal, and then afterwards I will need to seal it with something. So I'm a little bit undecided whether I'm going to seal it with just the Sculpey Gloss glaze or whether I'm going to use the resin. I'm not 100% sure. I'm thinking I will use resin. Right, so I have decided that we will be resining over these pieces. That way the final pieces are all going to be nice and shiny and cohesive. They'll be the same thickness because I rolled this base clay down to the same thickness as the painted pieces as well. So I'm now just going to cut out a bunch of coordinating pieces without knowing exactly what designs I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to stick to the smaller drop sizes, or drop shapes rather, and maybe a couple of little circles as well. So I'll pop these ones into the oven as well and get them all baked up and nicely cured. Once they are cured, our next step was to resin them. But as I work outside, unfortunately Mother Nature had other plans, and it is just way too cold, wet and miserable for me to do resin outside. So I'm going to have to wait until a nicer day. So it is now 2 days later, and the pieces have been hanging out nicely waiting in the cooled oven, just keeping the dust and dirt off of them. And as you can see, the weather is much nicer today, perfect for doing resin. So I've laid my pieces out on a silicone mat and on my baking trays, and we're going to be using this 2-part epoxy resin. This one's called Top Coat, and it is by a company called Iparency. One of the reasons that I really like this resin is that it is a really simple 1-to-1 ratio to mix. So nice and easy, don't have to think too much about the measurements. If applying resin to the top of your pieces is something that interests you and you'd like to know more tips and tricks and a more detailed process, I did do a tutorial about maybe 6 months ago or so, and that goes through the full step-by-step process, and yeah, I give you lots of tips and tricks in that one. So I will link that in the description box, and then that way you can watch that full one all about doing your resin doming. One thing I will mention though is when using any sort of resin, it doesn't matter what type, make sure you are using it in a really well ventilated area. I do mine outside, and make sure that you're using the correct PPE, so gloves, mask and covered clothing. I have a few ways that I like to apply the resin to my pieces. So this way is using a syringe, and I just give a nice little dollop of the resin onto each piece, like so. I sort of go around the edges first and then fill in that middle bit, just leaving it for a few moments just to sort of self-level itself before I start maneuvering it around. I quite like using a syringe because I find that it gives me really good control over the amount that's being put onto the pieces. If you just go straight with a pop stick onto it, I find it's quite messy. The other option is also a pipette because, I find you get pretty good control with that too. And then here I'm just using some silicone tipped tools just to spread it around and make sure that it is nice and even. In a moment, I'll just go back and do a little top up dollop onto the top of each one, and that just gives it a nice rounded domed top. And the thing with epoxy resin is that it does take a minimum of 24 hours to cure. So I will leave these outside for as long as I can before moving them into the cupboard space in our back room. And of course, just remember to keep them covered whilst they're outside. I've had many occasions where we've had little flies or bugs or leaves or just general dust blow into them. And one of the benefits of working on a silicone mat is that any overflow will be caught on the mat, and it's much easier to remove than just straight off of the tray. So I'm just going to flame over the top of these now as well. The flame on the lighter will help to pop any bubbles that have surfaced and makes a nice, shiny, smooth top of the resin. Okay, so it is now a day and a half-ish later and my resin is all beautifully cured, and I wanted to show you the results. So nice and shiny and even surface, and it just really makes those colours beautiful. I just love the effect of the resin on top. And that beautiful pearlized pink that I used, that resin has really brought that out and made it just so shimmery and beautiful. So it is now time for us to turn them into jewellery. So I will show you all the steps that we do next. So firstly, I am sanding around the edges. So when we cut the painted pieces out, some of that paint smudged down the edges. So I just needed to make sure that we sand all those bits off. And I always leave sanding till after the resin, just so that way I'm not going to get any dust within the resin. All right, here's a little example of a before sanding. So you can see the roughness and you can see the color transfer that's pushed down. Just there. And then in just a second, I'm going to show you a sanded piece. Which one? This one. All right, so there we go. You can see how much cleaner it is. There is still a little bit of color because it's stained the clay a little bit, but that's okay. It's much nicer once it has been sanded. So much more even and smooth. One step that I did forget to film was the drilling, but I do use my Dremel drill, and I drill after I've done the baking and the resining. So drilling is the last part, and then I do the assembling. So this brings us to the end of today's tutorial. All the pieces are now assembled and I have a really beautiful collection that I'm really proud of. I hope you guys have enjoyed coming along with me and making these. It has taken me quite a while. It's been almost been a full week of making these, but they're definitely worth it, and yeah, I really like them. Definitely going to keep a pair for myself of these. I'm also thinking that another colourway is definitely on the cards to do. Blues, greens, teals would be amazing. So I might do that and pop it up on the YouTube Shorts, or maybe even over on Instagram Reels. Don't forget to follow me over on Instagram as well as Facebook and here on YouTube if you enjoyed this and you'd like to see more. Well, thanks again for joining me today, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you again next week when we do some more creating. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you later. Bye.